Marillion are a British band who first appeared in 1979 and became the biggest band of the neo-progressive set, which was kind of like a new wave of prog rock that happened in the 80s. They were initially criticised for sounding like Genesis, and in some ways they did, but they led the way in for more human prog, so with big rock sounds and especially big synth sounds, and musically more accessible. For the first 10 years, Marillion were fronted by a guy called Fish, who was a large, charismatic and eccentric Scotsman whose vocals are reminiscent of Peter Gabriel, so that further increased the Genesis comparisons. But the resemblance is only passing. Fish has a dramatic delivery that's particularly effective, and he also wrote the songs for them at that time. Despite the fact that their album covers have fantasy elements, or certainly for the first few albums, the songs are mostly social satire and personal, heart-searching kind of stuff. In 1988, Fish left, but Marillion carried on. They never achieved the same level of exposure and stardom they had before, but they have had a loyal cult following under the steerage of Steve Hogarth, and some people would regard that as being the true Marillion rather than the Fish era. Some people would regard it the other way around. And they're still going, and at this point they have released 20 albums. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was Marillion's third studio album. It was also their most successful. It achieved worldwide and widespread mainstream success. And partly this is due to it being more commercial and accessible than a lot of prog was. It also contains their biggest hit, Kaylee. So I've reviewed this before, because I've been doing reviews in various guises before I started doing the video once. I'm not going to go into details, but probably more importantly, I got a copy of this album shortly after it came out. I'd already been listening to previous stuff by Marillion. I've been introduced to them by a school friend, and when this came out, I got a copy on cassette, and this turned out to be a good move, because this was the period in time when I was walking around quite a lot and listening to music on my Walkman. So the cassette was a really good thing for this. So I did. I listened to it frequently. In fact, for a while, I basically listened to it over and over, back to back. And a year or so later, I went to see them live, and they performed this album in its entirety as part of the set. I was so happy about that. So let's try and do some descriptions. So musically, it's rich and warm. It's big on the synth pads. It's produced like stadium rock, so it's made to sound big and expansive. It's harmonically very straightforward, rhythmically mostly so as well. A lot of the sounds and the textures actually are reminiscent, I would say, of Wall-era Pink Floyd, which is kind of this big sound, but quite simple musically. And while there are separate tracks listed, actually each side is a continuous piece of music which segues from track to track. Actually, the individual tracks, quite a few of them fairly short. You might get kind of, a verse and a chorus, and then you move on. Some of them are longer than that. And most of the segueing is pretty good, but occasionally you can hear the gears crunching. There are also times when they use the same musical themes that they've used before. This is the thing that I like. It helps give the whole album a feeling of unity. And it rocks and rolls along very nicely. There's some really good playing. So if it was just for the music, I would love it. And I think that would particularly draw out the guitar, which soars over the huge backing. Again, it's not complex guitar. It's just very evocative stuff, I would say. But there's lyrics, okay. Mostly they're in English. There's a few little bits of, there's a little bit of French in there as well. They're written by Fish, who was the front man, and it's a concept album about lost childhood and about his own life experiences. It's very personal and honest, but it's also very poetic, and he can certainly write some very kind of poetic and evocative phrases. I'm fairly sure it's intended to be jumping backwards and forwards in time to a remembered past and a kind of a decrepit present, as it were. And his delivery is great. It's very passionate. It's got quite a bite to it. There's quite a bit of heart to the whole thing, I would say. So, poignantly for an album that focuses on lost innocence and nostalgia, especially, it for me is very much an album that brings up nostalgia. As I say, it's got to be one of the albums that I've played most in my life, and a lot of the lyrics resonate with specific memories for me. Actually, I have this thing from albums that I've listened to on a Walkman particularly, that sometimes particular bits of music or albums that I know well will remind me, give me a visual image of where I was at one point when I was listening to them. And a lot of this is my memories are of Salford, where I was at university many years ago. My favourite track probably, although I love all of it, is Bittersweet, which has got a really slow build-up, kind of soundscapey stuff. And then Fish comes in with some spoken word stuff, which is very poetic. And I tend to kind of speak along with it because I know it very well. So I absolutely love this album. It's one of my total favourites. So it's great to see it on this list, albeit very low as far as I'm concerned. What do you think? Do you got any memories of this album? Is it possible that you're coming across it for the first time? It might be. Do you hate it? I'm quite happy for you to say so. Whatever you think, I'm always up for people's comments. So please talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.
A spider wanders aimlessly within the warmth of a shadow, not the regal creature of border caves, but the poor, misguided, directionless familiar of some obscure Scottish poet.